Hello there, it's Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have the Simon Says stamp Look for the Rainbows September 2019 card kit, and this kit is still available as of filming, so I will have everything listed down below, and let's go ahead and take a look at what comes inside this kit. For starters, you're going to get candy like always. You need candy when you're crafting, right? We're also going to get some envelopes. They come in Island Blue, Metallic Schoolhouse Red, and Metallic Audrey Blue. These are gorgeous. You're also going to get the Tim Holtz Kaleidoscope 3D Texture Fades Embossing Folder. Beautiful. You'll get the American Crafts Chamel Box of Crayons, Enamel Dots. You'll also get this incredible 12 double-sided sheets of Vicki Boutin mixed media 6x8 paper. And I can't even tell you just how much I'm in love with this paper. Like, I am in love. You know, you throw a rainbow in front of me and I'm just going to go nutso. And I like the subdued. Some of those patterns are a little bit subdued. So I'm just like, couldn't get enough. Like, I almost used up the entire pad just making cards because I love this paper. I don't know if I said that. You're also going to get some Nuvo Pure Sheen Gemstones. Let me just cut those open. They're really, really pretty, and it comes in about 3 sizes. There's mostly just big ones in mine. I don't know how everybody else's will turn out, but I like those. Those are beautiful. You're going to get the Simon Says stamp Look for the Rainbows 6x8 stamp set, another gorgeous stamp set. They knocked it out of the park. You're also going to get 7 sheets of Tim Holtz Idea-Ology Metallic 8x8 Craft Cardstock in all these absolutely gorgeous colors. And I didn't even break into it that much. I did a little bit, but not as much so I've got plenty left over to do lots of other things with. You get an idea sheet, like always. It's a great tool to go to when you don't have ideas. And then you're going to get some cardstock in 120-pound white, Audrey Blue, Schoolhouse Red, and Island Blue. For card number 1, I'm going to start off doing some stamping. So I have pulled out some Express It cardstock, and I'm putting this into my MISTI. And I'm going to grab the arrangement of flowers because I just thought this was so pretty. My plan is to stamp a couple of those out. And so I'm just arranging that in there. I'm going to do some Copic coloring. So all the coloring that I do today is Copic or alcohol marker. You can use any alcohol markers. But I'm inking this up with Memento Tuxedo Black ink because that is alcohol marker friendly. And then I'm going to just make sure that I have a good, I want a very good crisp black line. So then I'm going to flip that and I'm going to stamp that again one more time. And that's the beauty of the MISTI. You can stamp it out twice or as many times as you need to make sure that you have a good crisp image. And then I've really sped up my coloring. I'm using these same kind of colors for the entire, all the flowers that I color today. It just, this variation of colors. And all I did to pick out these colors was grab that patterned paper that came in the kit and just kind of compared that with the colors that I have because I have a color chart. And then I was able to pull colors out, and since these are a little bit smaller, a smaller arrangement of flowers, I only chose 2 colors, but for my bigger flowers, when I do start coloring those, I do end up grabbing another darker color just to add a little bit more drama to the coloring itself. But yeah, this is super simple. The way I do my coloring is I always go lightest to darkest. I know other people have good luck with darkest to lightest, and it does save them time, but I just find that I always get better results when I go lightest to darkest. And so that is what I'm doing here. I love this arrangement of color. Like I said, that pattern paper is absolutely gorgeous. And I went a little different and did blue centers. And then I colored the other ones the exact same. And so now I'm just going to fussy cut both of those out. I believe there are matching dies for this stamp set, but I've said it 1,000 times. I really don't mind fussy cutting. I have music on and I just sit there and jam and cut stuff out. I cut down some of that pattern paper, one of the more subdued ones, and I'm going to cut a circle out of the center because my card base is going to be some of that cardstock that came in the kit. This is the Island Blue. And so I cut that down to 4 1/4 by 11 inches and I'm scoring it at 5 1/2 inches. And I'm just getting that base ready because I plan to do some stamping right on that. So I ran a circle die over that pattern paper that I had, and I'm going to stamp right into the center of that sentiment that seems to just kind of go with that arrangement of flowers. It just looks like they were made for each other. So I am lining all that up into my MISTI, my mini MISTI. I'll set the sentiment inside the center there. Then I'm going to close the door and I'm going to pull out the pattern paper because it's not necessary to have it in there. I'm going to go over that with my magic embossing bag because I don't want any stray powder to get anywhere. And then I'm going to condition the stamp with my hand and the oils on my hand, and then I'm going to ink that up with some VersaMark ink, which is just a clear sticky ink. I'll stamp that down, and then I'm going to cover that with some Brutus Monroe Alabaster embossing powder. This stuff is absolutely some of my favorite. Very fine detail and it's great, and I'm going to pick that up before I make a very big mess with it. Because if you've noticed, I have the giant jar of embossing powder, and if that dumped over, well, one, I'd cry and I'd have a huge mess. So now I'm going to heat that with my heat tool till that is smooth and melted, and you'll be able to tell because you can hold it up to the light and you'll see that it's a little bit shiny and it's not matte finish anymore. So I'm just going to heat that, and you can kind of see it change. I love embossing. It's one of my favorite things to do. Brings me back to how I first started stamping. Once that was cooled down, I wiped away all the excess magic powder bag. And then I'm actually running that through my die cutting machine just between the plates to flatten that paper out a little bit. I'm going to take that pattern paper that I had, just run a little bit of liquid glue all over the back of that, and then I'm going to stick that down on my card front. I have this covering the entire card front, so I don't have a border or anything. And then I covered the backs of my swags with some foam tape. But before I attach those, I do want to stamp on the inside of my card, so I have inked up that swag with some chipped Sapphire Distress Oxide ink. I think that's so pretty. And then I have a sentiment as well that I'm going to stamp on the inside, and then that'll finish the center. I'll peel off all the backing paper on both of those arrangements of flowers, and then I'm going to attach those down to the front. I could have created all day. As a matter of fact, I did create all day with this kit because it's just gorgeous. I dumped all of my gemstones into just a little tray I got from the dollar section at Target, and then I'm grabbing my crystal katana, and I'm going to be extremely liberal with where I put these. I end up, after I was done with all my cards today, I ended up using up all of those gemstones. I figured, why not? I know some people like to hoard stuff, and I used to be like that, but I gotta tell you, there's so much satisfaction in using up your supplies. There's just something to it. And so that's gonna finish off card number 1. For card number 2, I'm going to do some controlled ink smushing. So I've got some old packaging, and I've got several distress oxide ink colors that I've chosen. And so I'm putting that ink down onto that packaging, spritzing it with water, and then sticking it down on top of my paper. That first color I've chosen is Fired Brick, and then I'm going to clean up my mess. I'll heat set that in between. But I chose these colors specifically based off of how they matched the Chamel box of crayons enamel dots. So the second color that I've chosen is Ripe Persimmon, and I'm just smushing that all over, trying to go obviously in rainbow order. Next color would be Mustard Seed, and I like how these Distress Oxide colors will sit on top of each other and they don't necessarily just blend, which is nice. So you've got this color underneath, and then you also have color that kind of sits on top. The second color, or that next color, was Twisted Citron, and now I'm moving on to Evergreen Bough. It's not necessarily a blue, it's more of a green, but it matched with those enamel dots so well that I had to do it. I'm picking up some more, I don't know why I have it on my glass mat, but I'm picking up some more of the Twisted Citron, and I'm going back over some more of that, spritzing that with water, doing a little bit more of the Fired Brick. And that's the neat thing about this, is you can keep going over it until you are happy with the results. Next, I'll put a little bit of that Evergreen Bough just onto my glass mat, and then I'll splatter that down with a paintbrush. Once everything is dry, I'm going to move on to, I already stamped, I apologize, my camera wasn't on, but I stamped the little birds using some Raven detail ink from Brutus Monroe, and then now I've sped up the coloring about 4 times because I do want to show you the coloring that I do. I was inspired by Kelly Ledavola. She does this a lot, where she does her Copic coloring over the top of already, stamped down like Distress Oxides or Distress Inks. She colors over the top with her Copic markers, and so I wanted to give that a try. And basically I've just chosen colors that would match the color underneath. So even if there's a little bit of orange or a little bit of like yellow in that case, I kind of try to mix those together. This case I'm doing yellow a little along with some green, trying to get those to blend, so that you have the the green matches where the green is, the yellow matches where the yellow is, and so on and so forth. And I have to tell you, I will be doing this again. I'm not sure if I mentioned, I did all this on some Strathmore watercolor paper. This is 140-pound watercolor paper. And Copics typically, I mean, it's not like you would color on watercolor paper, but this worked out just fine. And then I'll go over the whites of their eyes with my gel pen, and then I'm going to stamp my sentiment there. And so I'll grab out the ink one more time, pardon my head, stamp down, look for the rainbows, and then I'm going to adhere that down to my card base, which is some of that Schoolhouse Red cardstock. So I'm going to use liquid glue to adhere this down. I thought about putting dimension on it, and then I thought, well, just leave it the way that it is. But I did use liquid glue because there was a little bit of warping with all the water that I used. Once that's done, I'm going to move on to actually using the enamel dots that came in the kit. I grabbed the stars, so I'm putting a red star where the red is. I'm going to grab an orange star and put that where the orange is. Then I'm going to grab a yellow one, and so on and so forth, just to add a little bit of extra to this. And rainbows just sing to me. I don't know, they're just, I've loved them ever since I was a kid. Ask my mom. She'll tell you I was obsessed with rainbows. So, and then once that last enamel dot is down, that's going to finish off card number 2. Card number 3, I pull out some of that gorgeous, gorgeous metallic craft cardstock, and I trim that down along with some more of that patterned paper. I'm going to use the Kaleidoscope, and then it has all the instructions on the inside, so just basically follow that for whatever your machine is. And so I ran the Kaleidoscope texture fade over that purple. I end up changing my mind and I do it over some gold later, but I love how that looks. I love the texture that it gives. I'm inking up the biggest stamp, and then I'm just stamping that down onto some Express It cardstock. I'm not going to show you all of the coloring because it would get really tedious, but I do show some of it because instead of using the 2 colors like I am here, this is where I'm realizing that it would be nice to have a little bit more drama to the coloring. So I end up grabbing a darker, almost, well, it is a brown, it's an E99, and then bringing that in, and then I will blend that out a little bit more. But I love how dramatic that ends up looking. And I do the same thing with the green leaves as well. And then I fussy cut those out. I'm stamping my sentiment, thinking of you, across the middle, and then I'm going to trim that down, and I'm going to start adhering all the pieces of my card together. So my card base is the white cardstock that came in the kit. And then I'm going to take my pattern paper and just adhere that straight down to the card base. I'm kind of liking not really having borders all the time. That's my typical go-to, but I like having the pattern paper go all the way to the edge. I'm using liquid glue on all of that, and that just to get that to stay down because there's a lot of texture, I just stick a stamp block on top. I'm covering the back of my image with foam tape. I didn't do it with the leaves. I'm just going to use liquid glue, and before I really adhere down the flower, I'm going to stick some of those petals underneath, and I'm using a stamp block for that as well because that's very textured, and so it's having not a hard time adhering, it's just kind of wanting to poke up. So I'll do it for all the leaves. I end up trimming down that last portion to make sure that I can get that stuck under there, and then I'm going to adhere my sentiment down using the liquid glue as well. I'm using my glass mat to help me line it up straight, and then I will get that down, and then I'm going to pick it up and turn it over so that I can trim off all of the excess. And it's kind of wanting to pop up, but it's okay. We're getting it figured out. And then that's going to finish off card number 3. I think that one is a very pretty, easy, elegant card to make. Card number 4 is another one with a good amount of coloring on it as well. I'm going to once again put some Express It cardstock into my MISTI, and I'm going to line up the stamps that I'm choosing to use. And And you know what I found was interesting about that one stamp that looks like it has, you know, like the petals are falling back? You could probably use that either way. Like that top is probably either the center, the brown center of your flower, where the pollen is, or it could be like the bottom if you flipped it upside down so that it was holding onto the stem that way. So that's kind of neat. I'm not sure if you know what I'm talking about, but I did it with the first one. I colored it that way anyway. So I'm going to stamp those down. I'm going to stamp them a couple times. And then I am going to flip it over and I'm going to stamp it again. I told you there was a lot of coloring on this one. I'm not going to show it all to you because it's basically the same thing that I've done. And this video is mostly about ideas. If I showed all the coloring, this would be one heck of a long video. So I'll stamp it again just to make sure that it's good and crisp. And then I'm going to color all of those and then fussy cut them out. Now I'm getting my little makeshift splatter box. I had to get a new one once we moved because I wasn't going to move a box, just a box. So I have a new one and I'm sticking all of my pieces in there, and I'm going to grab some of this sheer shimmer spritz in the color Frost. This is by Tsukineko, and I'm going to spritz that all over. Just shake it up and spritz that all over the flowers and the leaves. I didn't put the little birds in there because I didn't want them to be shimmery, but this stuff puts so much shimmer, and that's what that looks like. So I'll have that listed down below, but look at how shimmery those are. You can even kind of tell just with them sitting there. I'm going to grab some of this beautiful blue paper from the kit and I'm going to trim it down. I'm trimming it down to 4 inches by 5 1/4. I end up taking another piece of cardstock from the kit and trimming that down. Just another piece of the pattern paper that has like some writing on it. It's very subtle, but I love it. And I'm going to start arranging my flowers and their stems. I thought about using the petal or the leaves, but then I end up using those on the inside. I end up using every piece of this except one of the little stems. I don't use one of the stems. So I'll take some of my liquid glue and I'm going to adhere the stems down, just using that liquid glue, kind of using my flowers as a guide. But look at all that shimmer. Every time I lift those, you can see the shimmer. I love it. There's so much. Yeah, and I'm just placing each of those stems down. And then I'm going to back my flowers with some foam tape, and then I will, take off the backing paper and stick those down. And I don't know, I thought this looked like a fun little scene, and I love that background paper. It just really adds to it. And then I'm going to take my little bird. After I get him down and glue him down, I'm going to flip my paper. And then I'm going to cut off the stems, the excess of the stems, because obviously those aren't needed. And then it just looks like there's a continuation, like they are growing up from the card. And then I'm going to start getting ready to adhere that to that other piece of the patterned paper. Really, really pretty patterned paper. I usually don't use the patterned paper like this like crazy, but I just loved this stuff. For my sentiment, I'm going to grab the Thinking of You. I tend to need Thinking of You and Thank You and Birthday the most. And I'll stamp that onto a piece of scrap paper. I didn't stamp it straight, so I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to re-stamp it. And then I'm going to trim that down. I'll cut that at an angle. And then I'll use my liquid glue one more time. And I'm going to adhere that down to the front of my card. And at this point, I decide to start decorating the inside. I wanted to use all those pieces, so I'm just sticking them all down flat with some liquid glue, just there in the corner of the card. And I will have a little bit of stuff that hangs over, but obviously you can take care of that with just by trimming it off. And I'll adhere my little bird as well. So now the card will be decorated on the inside and the outside. And then I'll flip it over, trim off my excess leaves. And then it will be ready to adhere the front panel to the card base itself. And I'll just do that with some liquid glue once again. But then I used everything I stamped other than that one little stem. But I'm not done there. To finish off the card, I'm going to grab the little Nuvo gems. These are the Nuvo Pure Sheen Gemstones, and I'm going to adhere those down using my crystal katana along with my liquid glue. And I was very generous, very, very generous. Typically I don't put this much on there, but I just, for whatever reason, could not stop myself. I thought these were so pretty, and I was trying to, have it be the eye trail. I'm not really good with that, but I end up really liking the way that this looks. It's probably too much for some people, but you know, hey, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? So I just put down as many gems as I wanted, and I was happy with it. And so that's going to finish off card number 4. Cards number 5 and 6 are basically the same. I just use different colors on them, so that's why I said 5 cards, 1 kit. I do have a couple of bonus cards at the end of this, but let's go ahead and talk about 5 and 6. So I do trim down some pattern paper. I wanted to try stamping right onto the pattern paper and then Copic coloring on that. So what I do with this big bloom is I stamp it with my Memento Tuxedo black ink, and then I end up making a couple of masks. I thought for some reason I was going to need 2 masks, but I only needed 1, so I do save the other mask and I stick it with the stamp set and save that for another time. But I just keep the leftover ink and then stamp that twice, and then I will cut right along the stamp line, like right on it, and that will make the mask so that I don't have any ghosting, if that makes sense. So I'll just trim that out, and then I will eventually peel off that backing paper from my mask, and then I'll stick that down. And this is the mask paper from Simon Says Stamp, I believe. But then I can move my image or my panel around and then stamp that down. And so when you're masking, anything that you want in the forefront, that has to be stamped first. So if you look at how, or at the end, you'll see that that one that I stamped first is the one that's going to show at the very front. And then everything else will be behind that. And I'll stamp the next one down, and then I'll carefully remove my mask. And then I will move it over to the next flower so that I can have 4 flowers all the way across my panel. I end up doing this twice, so this is the exact same thing I do for both cards, so I don't show you the second one. But I'm just moving that around. Sorry, some of it's in frame and some of it isn't. Still inking it up with the Memento Tuxedo black ink and stamping my image. And then there you have the 2 panels. And you can see one of those flowers is in the very forefront. So this is my hex chart. This is what I used the whole time, trying to make sure that I had colors that matched either the paper or, you know, whatever else I was trying to match it to. And I'll show you the coloring of one petal. I'm not going to show you all of it because it's the same. And just like that yellow flower that I had colored earlier with the dramatic brown to it, I end up using a very dark blue as well. And the hex chart comes in really handy because I can kind of see where they are on that spectrum and then go from there. So I'm putting down my first color, and when you're coloring on like pattern paper, it's obviously not going to be the same as stamping right onto something that is a little bit more alcohol marker friendly. It works out just fine, but you definitely need to blend out more than you would on other papers. So because you can see the very dramatic. I'm using a flicking motion as well so that it's kind of less pronounced at the end of my flick, if that makes sense. But here I am using that really dark blue, and it is quite dramatic, which is nice. That's what I was going for. But you can see that there is quite a, well, it's a little too dramatic at this point. So once I've gotten that down, then I will flick out again with the mid-tone color. And then I will go over once again with my lightest color and flick that out even more so that it blends a little bit better. And then you can see it looks pretty good. And so I do that with all the flowers with this blue, and then the other ones I do yellow, as you can see. But I love the subtleness of the pattern, the little polka dots that poke through in the background. And I fussy cut those out. For my sentiment, I'm just going to stamp the thinking of you onto some more of that pattern paper. This is just one of the ones that I had left over, and I stamp it twice because I'm, like I said, making these cards basically the same. And then I'm going to use my paper trimmer, and I'm going to use the wire guide just to trim those both out. Get those ready to adhere to my card fronts. I do cover the backs of my flowers with a lot of foam tape, as you can see. And so I'm going to start removing the backing off of that foam tape. This way, obviously, I have a little bit of dimension, and added with those the polka dotted background, I feel like this is just a super fun card. And then I'll adhere that down. I do end up having a little bit poking off the side. I didn't cut it super great, so I'm just going to take my scissors and I will fussy cut the rest of that off of there. Now I'm ready to adhere my sentiment, but before I do that, I'm going to cut that at an angle, and then I'll use some liquid glue to adhere that to my card front. And I'll have a little bit hanging off, and once again I'll trim that down just using my scissors. And it's the same process for both. And then I'll use my liquid glue to adhere this down to my card base. This is a side folding A2 size card, but it's more of a landscape card, which is kind of fun. I don't always do those. And then I take that leftover piece that I had from the pattern paper and I put it on the inside. I love to do that because then I feel like I'm not really wasting the paper, but I'm adding a little something to the inside to add a little interest to it. I grab the big stamp one more time, and then I'm going to ink that up with some mustard seed ink. I thought that was kind of fun since my centers of my blue flowers were yellow. This way I can still write over that without worrying about it being too dark and then you can't see through it. And here is where I use what is left of those gemstones. I put 2 on the yellow flowered one, and then 3 of those big ones on the blue card. And then once those are all done, that's going to finish off cards number 5 and 6. Again, I love how that pattern paper just is kind of subtle and you can see it through. It's a lot of fun. So then I'm going to show you the cards that I made. These are just using some of the patterns, the pattern papers. I didn't do a whole lot of stamping other than the thank you, and they're very, very simple. And so let's go ahead and take a look at all the cards that I did make today. I would love to know which one of these was your favorite. If you did have one, go ahead and leave that in the comment section down below. That's one of my favorite parts about making all these cards, is just hearing what you guys like. I love it. And so if you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I typically have about 4 videos a week usually, so I always have something going on. And as always, thank you so much for stopping by.